On November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were brutally murdered inside their home, shaking the nation and leaving behind a trail of chilling questions. Who was Bryan Kohberger? What really happened the night in Moscow, Idaho? And why did it take 47 agonizing days to find the suspect? This is the full, detailed breakdown of the Idaho Four murders.
Buckle up. You're listening to Voltage and Villain.
What's up, everybody? I'm Phoenix.
And I'm Moira.
And you're listening to another episode of Voltage and Villains. Today, we're going to be covering the Idaho Four murders. You say that you have not heard of this case before. I don't feel like that's true. I feel like you've heard it. You just don't realize that that's what it is that you've heard.
And I've heard about it in passing.
Yeah, in passing.
In passing. Yeah, I know about it in passing, but I don't know, what happened. I just know, 4 people, students died.
So this case takes place in Moscow, Idaho on November 13th, 2022. On November 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students, and I'm going to say their names because I don't like addressing them as the Idaho Four, but obviously that's a faster way to get people to realize the case that you're talking about. So I'm going to go ahead and say their names. Xana Kernodle, Ethan Chapin, Kaylee Goncalves, and Madison Mogen were brutally murdered in their off-campus home. So here's the night that everything happened. On that Sunday, one of Xana's friends began calling Jasmine, Xana's sister, frantically and telling her to come to Xana's house, that something is wrong. Jasmine rushed over to Xana's and her roommate's house. And, Jasmine only lived 15 minutes away. So she's rushing over there. And the whole time she's rushing over there, she's calling Xana. And she's also calling Xana's boyfriend, who's Ethan Chapin, who was also in the house. She's also calling, but they're not answering. Xana and her boyfriend are not answering the phone. But she's calling them multiple times. While she's also rushing over there, she's also calling their dad, Jeffrey, who had literally just left from visiting them for dad's weekend and was already on his way home.
Dude.
Jasmine told him to meet her at Xana's house, that something is wrong. When they both got there, they found that the house was taped off by police. And when the police found out that they were the relatives of Xana, they escorted them to the police station. And that's when they told them the devastating news that Xana and 3 other individuals in that home were brutally murdered.
Dude.
Now, the other victims, there's 3 other victims that's in the house. Right. So, as you know, the police, they start to call around if the other, there's no other family members that were showing up at the house, because at the time, it was just Xana's sister, Jasmine, that had received a call that said that something was wrong. So now it's up to the police to notify the other 3 victims' families. So that's what they do. They start reaching out to the other victims' families, and Kaylee's family received a very vague phone call from them informing that something had happened, but they got no details.
What?
At around 4:00 in the afternoon that day, though, a deputy arrived at their door and broke the news to them that Kaylee and 3 others were brutally murdered. And they asked if one of the people that was murdered was Maddie. And yes, it was Maddie. And they suspected that because Maddie and Kaylee were inseparable. They were best friends since childhood. So they wanted to know, was Maddie there? And it was confirmed, yes. Maddie was also there. So, and Xana, like I said before, was dating Ethan Chapin, who was a triplet. He loved working in a tulip farm, boating, and hanging out with his siblings. Now, immediately after hearing this news, Steve and Christy Goncalves, Kaylee's parents, immediately started doing their own investigation.
That's good for them.
Yeah. So Kaylee's sister, Olivia, immediately took matters into her own hands as well. One friend, so she took Kaylee's phone, went through her call log, and began cold calling all the recent numbers in the phone. Smart. One friend told her that Kaylee had been seen at a bar called the Corner Club Bar at around 1:07 a.m. and later at a grub truck, which a local famous, I think the name of it was called Grub Truck. Yeah, the name of it was called Grub Truck. It was a local famous food truck, famous for serving mac and cheese.
That sounds good, though. I'm not gonna lie.
Sounds really good. Olivia also learned that Kaylee had texted a rideshare driver at around 1:45 a.m. requesting a ride from the grub truck to their home. And the rideshare driver mentioned that there was another person with her. Like, so he didn't just only pick up Kaylee. There was another woman that was with her.
Okay.
Also, you should check the security camera that was on the side of the grub truck, because the grub truck has a security camera that's there. So maybe you should also check the security cameras. Right. Now, they check the security footage and they were able to confirm that the person that Kaylee was with was Madison.
Okay.
Now, the rideshare driver said that he dropped them off at around 1:56 a.m. At 2:56 a.m., Kaylee made a phone call to her boyfriend, but he didn't answer. The Goncalves family believes that she fell asleep shortly after this. And according to the police affidavit, they believe that Kaylee and Maddie were stabbed between 4 and 4:25 a.m. while sleeping in the same bed, just like they had done their entire lives, because they were best friends. So that's how they were found.
Right.
Now, Howard Bloom, who's a journalist who wrote extensively on this murder case for an online magazine, I believe it's called Airmail, is now working on a book about the case. So he's written plenty of things about the case. And he reported that the crime scene was so bloody that blood was seeping through the exterior walls of the house.
What?
Now, I've seen other videos about criminologists and forensic. I forgot the name of that job, but there's people that come in and study crime scenes, and they're able to just look around and tell how a murder happened, what might have been going on based on blood splatters, and different things about the crime scene. And the fact that I've never heard of a case in which blood is excreting out the side of the exterior walls. That means that blood was splattering everywhere. It's a brutal murder, and you're going to hear why in a second, why the murder was so bloody and brutal. So let me tell you how everyone was found. Xana and Ethan were found near Xana's bedroom on the second floor.
Makes sense.
And Kaylee and Maddie were found on the third floor in Maddie's room, sleeping side by side on a single bed.
Okay, so they lived in like a 3-story house then.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So this is not a small house.
No.
And it houses, and now they're not the only ones in the house. I'm going to get to, there's 2 other people that live there, and they're actually the survivors, and what they saw and what they experienced during this time is going to be very important to this case as well. So Christy and Steve, the parents of Kaylee, spoke with coroner Kathy Mabbitt before the gag order was issued by the courts. And she explained to them how the 2 girls were positioned when they were found. The headboard of the bed was against the wall, and the left side of the bed was also touching the wall, meaning that one person
was cornered out.
Would be cornered in, and one person would be closest to the door.
Right.
Now, Maddie was sleeping on the outside of the bed, and Kaylee was on the inside. Maddie is believed to have been the very first victim of this killer, and evidence suggests that Kaylee woke up and tried to get away, but obviously couldn't because of how the bed was positioned, and she's kind of cornered in. Now, evidence suggests that Kaylee woke up and was trying to get away but couldn't. Now, like I said before, they were not the only ones that lived there. There were 2 survivors in that house that night, and one of them's name is Dylan Mortensen. She has described seeing the intruder. She is the only one of the 2 survivors that actually can give a somewhat solid description of the intruder. She described him as a man of not muscular build, but athletic. Okay. Dressed in all black, a ski mask, and has bushy eyebrows. Because his ski mask was covering, I think, up to his nose. So she was able to see, I believe, his eyes and his eyebrows, and she described it as being bushy.
But how did she kind of get away and not like survive?
So, I don't think Brianna Fox is an investigator. I forgot her exact title, but I'm going to say she's an investigator on the case because she does look into it. She describes he would have been probably really tired after stabbing for over a minute and a half, because anybody that's done a combat sport knows, right? Like, there's a difference between, let's say, hitting a heavy bag and lifting weights, and then when you actually get into like a boxing ring or a cage and you do a physical combat.
Yeah, like actual physical combat.
Physical combat where you'd be stabbing or punching or kicking. Like, that takes a lot out of you.
Yeah.
And the fact that he had, at this point, murdered 4 people, he's stabbing for quite some time. He would have been physically exhausted and probably just didn't want to attack them, continue attacking anybody else. So now investigators believe that the murder weapon was something called a K-bar knife. It's spelled K-A-B-A-R knife. It's a military style knife that's meant to tear through bone, ligaments, and organs.
No.
So you like that knife that you see, like I believe Rambo had it, and also in Call of Duty, the knife that you see,
like the melee knife.
Yeah, like that type of military style knife.
Okay.
It's not like a normal knife that
it's not just like a straight up knife.
No, it's
probably
like,
shaped differently.
Yeah, it's shaped differently and is designed to do maximum damage. Now, Dylan Mortensen locked herself in her room after seeing the masked man and waited almost 8 hours before calling 911. However,
whoa,
yeah,
hold on.
And the internet was tearing her up over this.
Anyone would. What do you mean you locked yourself up in a room and didn't call 911 for 8 hours? Did you go to sleep? Did you like just chill on your phone thinking this was gonna be okay? Like, I'm so confused.
Yeah, but so a lot of people were confused, and I'm not gonna lie. When I first heard it, I was like, "What?" But Brianna Fox, the investigator I mentioned before, explained that it's common for people to freeze up in shock during traumatic situations. But I mean, freezing up for 8 hours is like kind of egregious. But we've also covered another case, the Morgan Metzer case, where when the Batman intruder broke into her home and then tied her up and then put her on her back porch with a pillowcase over her head, and she couldn't see or hear anything, and was told not to move until she hears a car honk 2 times. She was out on that back porch for 40 minutes. But when she described it to police, she said that she felt like she was only out there for 15 minutes, remember? So a lot of people who study crime scenes and talk to victims and investigate crimes have said before that, like, most people assume that when your adrenaline gets pumping that like time would move slow. And that's true. Yeah. Your time moves slow for the victim, but it's still moving at normal speed in actual time.
That's true.
So she was out there on her back porch, Morgan Metzer, in the other case we covered, for 40 minutes. She thought she was only there for 15, which means that that's almost 4 times longer, 3 times longer than what she perceived it to be. If you see a crime scene like that and you go and, let's say, hide, and you're like, oh my God, I'm just going to hide, and you think you're only hiding for an hour or 2, it would make sense how that hour or 2 actually turns out to be 8 hours, not an hour or 2.
I get it, but I still don't understand how that turns into 8 like 45 minutes, 15 minutes. Okay, that's understandable.
Yeah.
8 hours?
So I actually have a timeline
8?
that can also kind of go towards why it took 8 hours. But I'm not going to lie. This timeline when I go through this timeline, I look at it and I go, still, what the hell? Right? Like I still have a lot of questions.
Carelessness.
Because, okay, let me go through this timeline. At 4:12 a.m., it is confirmed that Xana received a DoorDash delivery.
Okay.
There's also evidence to show that she ate her food that she got. Now, remember, the crimes happened. The investigators believe that the stabbing happened between 4 and 4:25 a.m. 4:12 a.m., it is confirmed that Xana received a DoorDash delivery. At 4:17 a.m., security camera audio captured that. Now, security camera audio, there's a security camera that's about 50 feet away from Xana's bedroom.
Right.
And it picked up audio, and it picked up like whimpering or crying voices, and followed by a loud thud and barking by Kaylee's dog. Now, at 4:22 to 4:24 a.m., this is when the survivors, Dylan and this other girl who's named in the court's documents as BF, they start exchanging text messages back and forth. And their text messages was, Dylan texted BF and said, "No one is answering. I'm really confused." And BF said, "Yeah, dude, what the F?" Xana was wearing all black. Dylan then says, "I'm freaking out. And no, it's like a ski mask almost. I'm not kidding." Then at 10:32, the survivors texted one of the victims and said, "Are you up?" At 11:58, that's when the 911 call is made, and they say that they have an unconscious person, and they're talking about Xana. And that's when police go there and they discover the crime scene. They discover 4 people that's murdered.
What I don't understand is what do you mean she's unconscious, but she was stabbed to death?
Exactly.
You're not going to see the blood or the stab wounds?
Exactly.
That's confusing.
So that's the part that gets confusing.
You're either really careless.
But mind you, these text messages were just released not too long ago, like maybe about a month or so ago. So, and remember, there's still a gag order on everything.
That's true.
Until court starts. So
Right.
we're going to get a lot more clarification on all of this. But between them being able to see the killer, give a description, but the killer not harm them, and then also these text messages, and then also what they said when they called 911, considering how brutal the crime scene was.
And then not just that, the time difference between when you saw the person and then when you called 911 is a huge time gap. It's too big to be like, yeah, you were nervous. Like, you guys were clearly doing something else or fell asleep. Like, that makes no sense.
Well, of course, they did go to sleep, but
what? How do you sleep?
So, investigators believe that the weapon was a K-bar knife. Right.
Yeah.
And it's a military style knife that's meant to tear through bone, ligaments, and organs.
Nah, that was on purpose. That's not a regular house kitchen knife. He went to go get that knife on purpose.
Yes, whoever did it wanted to kill. We know that based off the type of knife that was used. Now, out of this whole horrific crime scene, the only evidence that was left behind was a knife, DNA evidence that was left behind on the killer's knife sheath. The knife sheath is basically like the holder.
Oh, case
for like the military style knife.
Yeah.
And it was the knife sheath was left behind on the bed next to Madison Mogen.
What?
Which ultimately, now this is what ultimately left investigators being able to say somewhat confidently who the suspect ended up being.
Okay.
Now, after this crime happened on November 13th, it took investigators 47 days to capture who they believe to capture a suspect.
47.
Now, the nation and everybody was wondering during those 47 days, how the F can it take 47 days to capture a suspect in a case like this? But according to Brianna Fox, who is an investigator on this case, says, that's pretty fast considering this type of case. And I'm not going to lie, I think that it is too, covering other cases, especially cases like this. This sounds very similar to the Golden State Killer cases.
Way too similar.
And if I'm without rape and without any burglary, and if I'm being completely honest, that's going to go into my theory for later as to why and how and who actually executed this crime. Because this sounds very similar to the Golden State Killer case that went cold for 40-something years. So I'll take 47 days over 40-something years.
That's scary. 40-something years and 40-something days. Whoa. Yeah, too many coincidences.
I'll take 40-something years over 47. I mean, I'll take 47 days over 40-something years of taking to solve this. So
heck yeah.
She's right. 47 days is pretty quick for cases like this.
But that's the thing. You have technology nowadays where it tracks people and it tracks like things. So like, it is a little bit long considering that you do have those tools to access.
Well, no. And that's actually how they also ended up catching them. So investigators did a video canvas. And a video canvas is basically them lining up video footage from the surrounding area and then mapping that out to other surrounding areas to get a full crime picture of what happened and who could have been a potential suspect in the crime.
Okay.
So investigators did a video canvas and they captured a white Hyundai Elantra, a 2011 to 2013 white Hyundai Elantra making 3 passes by the victim's house starting at around 2:40 a.m. but primarily, starting at 3:30 a.m.
Whoa, that's an hour before the killing.
Yes, because the killings, like we said before, happened at around between 4 to 4:25 a.m.
Right.
Now, the car was then seen speeding away from the scene and heading back towards Washington, which is a university that's about 10 minutes away. That's about 10 miles away.
Oh.
And arriving there at around 5:30 a.m. after taking an indirect route back to that university. So authorities identified the car as this Elantra, and they say, okay, we believe that this car could have had something to do with the murders. So after noting the license plate, they run the license plate and it goes back to a name, Bryan Kohberger. Now they run his license plate and they run his driver's license, and they see that he also fits the physical description that Dylan, who's one of the survivors of the murder, gave.
What?
About the same height, same build, bushy eyebrows. So, and now that I see how he looks, I don't think I would necessarily describe his eyebrows as bushy, but he does have like what people would describe as hunter eyes, which is his eyebrows protrude out a bit, which I mean, in the dark and in a ski mask, like you would say that like you can probably mistake that for just being bushy eyebrows, but like his eyebrows are very prominent. They stick forward very prominently. They stick forward
a lot.
So they secured a warrant to obtain his cell phone records, because now if they can say, okay, this car was around the vicinity of this crime scene and then he went back to this university, now let's see if his phone records show any pings in the area.
But wait, hold on. His car was seen driving through. Was it just casually driving through, or is it like multiple times?
No, so it's 3 times.
3?
3 times.
No, that's on purpose.
Starting at around 3:30 a.m.
Because like once or twice, okay, because like once you're passing through to drop something off, twice you're going back to like go back to where you're coming from, but 3 times?
Yeah, and one of those times was basically like a U-turn. And then also it was seen speeding away at around the time after the murders would have happened.
No.
So that's why they even started tracking that car in the first place. They secured a warrant to obtain his cell phone records, and the records showed that at around 2:47 a.m., coinciding with surveillance capturing his car leaving his apartment complex, the phone stopped connecting to the network.
Whoa.
Then later on, his phone later reconnected south of Moscow, which is not far from where the murders happened, as he's traveling back to his apartment.
Whoa.
So investigators found that his phone was also near the victims' homes a certain number of times before the murder. Guess how many times before the murder happened that they were able to locate his phone in the vicinity of that house?
I would say it has to be between 10 and 15 times, because like 5 times, there's like so many possibilities. Yeah. But 10 to 15 is like a large number where you're like, no, you're doing this on purpose.
It was 12 times.
12?
Yeah, it was 12 times. And a 13th time happening immediately like after, like the morning after the murder.
What type of creepy shit is going on?
So this is something that Brianna Fox, who I mentioned before, notes is consistent with what killers do.
Yeah.
They oftentimes revisit the scene of the crime almost immediately after or shortly after they do the crime happen,
right,
to go just scope out the scene,
right,
and see.
Right.
So yeah, it is normal for people who do a crime or something bad to go look
but
at
for serial killers, it's more like for serial killers and people who do things like that, it's less of a let's see what happened. It's more of like a let's see if they have anything, like let me relive the moment a little bit. Like I feel like it just excites them. You know what I mean? Like it's this weird psychopath
and a lot of
behavior.
And a lot of experts say that yes, the reason that they go back to the scene of the crime, it gives them a sense of fulfillment. Like, yeah, I did that. It'd be like if you were Batman. So like the positive side to it would be like if you were Batman or a superhero and you saved the world and everyone's talking about, oh my God, did you see how this superhero did this, that, and the third? Like, and you feel good.
Yeah.
And then you're like, yeah, and you don't even know it's me. It's like that, but the sinister version to it.
That's disgusting.
Yeah. So the only physical evidence to the crime scene was DNA that was found on a knife sheath that was left behind, that was found near Maddie's body. Surveillance footage showed a car matching his white Hyundai Elantra leaving the scene. His phone records later revealed that he was near the victim's house 12 separate times, and before the murders, and including once the morning after the murders. So now they go, okay,
we got you,
Bryan.
Right,
you're suspect numero uno. Now, although there's a microscopic amount of DNA that was found on the knife sheath, when they ran it through the national database, it came up with no matches.
Oh, so that means this person was a first-time offender or something like that.
Yes, exactly. So during this time, when they identified Bryan Kohberger as suspect numero uno. They find out that during this time, Kohberger is driving back 2,500 miles with his dad back to his hometown in Pennsylvania for the holiday break, because this is around Christmas time.
Okay.
Now, it's around that holiday time when kids get out of school and some people return home. So they find out that Kohberger allegedly told his father that he was having trouble at his job, which prompted his dad to fly out 2,500 miles, to drive back 2,500 miles with his son, because apparently he was upset or distraught over something that's happening at work. Now,
that's creepy.
That is creepy, which leads them to believe, okay, he's probably more distraught over committing this murder. He's probably more shaken up over the fact that he did this murder.
Right.
But they can't prove that yet. Now, during this trip, Kohberger and his dad was stopped twice by police for traffic violations. But you can see on the police body cam that Kohberger remained calm and composed during these traffic stops.
Whoa.
It's unclear if he suspected that the police were on to him at this time, but that's why they were analyzing that footage, because they were trying to see, like, is he nervous? Like,
yeah, like what's his reaction?
Anything, but he was like calm, cool, collected, like it was like a normal, like how, like obviously you're a little bit bright eyed, like
right.
Whoa, like why are you pulling us over? But right. He didn't have anything that would give away to say, oh my God,
like he's nervous.
Are they really pulling me over because they suspected I did these murders? So
which is questionable though, because oftentimes, like, naturally you'd have a natural human paranoia of like
getting pulled over by the police.
Am I like did I do something? Yeah, especially if you did kill these people, right? You'd have a natural paranoia of like, are you onto me? But like the fact that he handled that so calm is concerning. I'm not gonna lie.
No, like it could be, but then also like if you're innocent of the crime, that you would react normally to your normal traffic stop. So that's why they're not sure if he had if he knew that they were on him or not. That's
true, but also his dad was with him, so
that wouldn't mean anything. So investigators then call out to Pennsylvania and start collaborating with a team out there, a police investigative unit, and they say, hey, head over to the Kohberger's family home and recover some DNA from the house. So they recover the father's DNA from the trash can, very similar to how they caught the Golden State Killer. And when they tested, so they wanted to match the DNA that they found from the dad to the knife sheath, because that's the only physical DNA that was left behind that they could confirm was left behind by the killer. And when they tested that DNA, they found that whatever DNA was on this tissue is the father of the DNA that they found on the knife sheath.
Oh, snap.
And remember, they already suspect that the DNA that they found on the knife sheath is Bryan Kohberger.
Right.
Which is
his dad's
DNA that's on this tissue. Oh, so that is their first big link where they go, oh, the DNA says that this is the father. Okay, we know that this is Bryan's father. So we know that it was probably Bryan. So now that's how they were able to obtain a search warrant. Well, that's how they were able to arrest Bryan. Oh. And then also obtain a search warrant for his DNA. So on December 30th, 2022, Bryan Kohberger was arrested at his parents' home in Pennsylvania. They obtained this warrant to test his DNA to try to match it to the DNA that was found on the knife sheath now. And when they test that DNA, they tested Bryan's DNA to the DNA that was found on the knife sheath. It was 5.3 octillion times more likely to belong to Bryan Kohberger than anyone else on the planet.
So what, like that's
not even a percentage thing at that point. That just means, homeboy, it's probably you.
Yeah, it's like 99.9%.
That's you.
Yeah,
that's you.
Because you have like a little bit of room for like uncertainty or whatever, but it's 99.9%.
That's you. Exactly. Right. So his attorney... So when Bryan got arrested, his attorney claimed that he was looking forward to being exonerated. What? And I'm going to tell you why this... Now, that statement alone right there plays into my theory for later. And I'm going to tell you why. Hold on.
But you looking forward to being exonerated, that's a little shady. Shouldn't it be on some... Oh, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything. I'm looking forward to getting exonerated.
His statement was, I'm looking forward to being exonerated. I'm going to tell you... I'm going to tell you at the end of all this... My biggest fucking theory, and I think it all points to him, and hopefully it all comes out in court. So at the time, Kohberger. So now let's learn a little bit about Kohberger. So at the time, Kohberger was a PhD candidate studying criminology at Washington State University.
Hold on, he was studying what?
Criminology. PhD, might I add. PhD candidate studying criminology at Washington State University, which is located just 10 miles away from the victims' homes. Now, he has pleaded not guilty, but this is a plea that was entered by the judge, not him.
What?
And the state of Idaho is seeking the death penalty against him. Now, Olivia Goncalves, which is Kaylee's mom, discovered, because remember they're doing no. This is yes. This is Kaylee's sister. My fault. Discovered that Kohberger, because remember they're doing their own investigation,
right?
Which I'm glad they were, because they found out some shit that the police could not even get to in time.
Nah, boy.
They discovered that Kohberger had posted online questionnaires on Reddit to people who have been incarcerated as criminals, to incarcerated criminals, asking them questions like, how did you pick your target?
What?
They also discovered that Kohberger had an Instagram account. And when they looked, they said, okay, but this could be anybody. This could be, because they did this research the second that it came out the second that Bryan was arrested and it came out that he was the prime suspect,
right,
they jumped on it and started doing their investigations.
Good,
and that's when they went and found this Reddit posting that he did. But then also that same time, they found an Instagram account with his name and his picture. So they're saying, okay, is this really his account, or is this like a fake account that somebody made of him because they found out the same time that he's a suspect and they just decided to make a fake account? You know, weirdos that exist.
Yeah. Weird internet people.
When they look up this account and they start trying to verify whether or not it's him, they start to see that he's following and being followed by other people with the same last name that looks like it's his family members. So they go, okay, this account must be legit.
Right.
You know what else they find?
What?
That he's also following two of the victims, Maddie and Kaylee.
Whoa.
Not only was he following Maddie and Katie, they find out by going, now the account was private. The account is private. Okay. So they can't really see, and obviously they can't request because it's not going to get accepted because he's been arrested.
He's been arrested.
But they look and they go, okay, he's following Maddie and Kaylee. Let's go to Maddie and Kaylee's profile and see, maybe has he liked any of their pictures? Has he interacted with them before? He liked majority of Maddie's photos. What the fuck? Yes.
Hold on. Who was killed first? Maddie, right?
Maddie was killed first. Now, hold on. That also comes to the theory. That also comes to some of the investigators' theories that's coming up in a second. Because here's some things that they can prove. And then now that the family found out this, it kind of ties into that.
Right.
Unfortunately, the account was deleted before it could be fully verified to be his account.
Of course.
Now that the news is broke that Bryan is the prime suspect in this case,
right,
investigators told Steve, the dad of one of the victims, that Kohberger had been scouting the house, learning the residents' lifestyle patterns, watching when they came, when they went, and they suspected that he'd even broken in once before.
Whoa.
Now, remember, we covered the Golden State Killer case, and a lot of this sounds very similar to that.
Too similar.
And what is the Golden State Killer mainly known for?
He's known for breaking in. He's known for breaking in before breaking in.
Yes.
So he breaks in, so
but
he has
also he's known for vanishing for 40 years and almost never getting caught until the DNA evidence eventually caught up to him.
That's true.
And committing most of his murders, even though he had a gun on him, he committed most of his murders by stabbing. And no one was able to find him for 40 years until they did the backwards genealogy
test from the tissue paper from the trash.
Exactly, but they had to find a relative of him to even then test,
link him,
you know,
to the murders.
It sounds very similar to that. Now, obviously, his he wasn't planning to get caught, but like a criminal that got away with 13 murders and 50 something over damn near 100 break-ins and 50 rapes, got away for so many years. And maybe, you know, this guy, he's studying criminology. Maybe he thought the same thing, like, hey, I can get away if I execute it the same way. He was dressed very similar to how the Golden State Killer was dressed, according to the description that the surviving roommate gave.
Right.
So Christy Goncalves, the mother of one of the victims as well, the husband of Steve, believes that Kohberger originally intended to kill just one person, but was surprised to find Kaylee and Maddie together. And that's how the massacre of 4 ended up happening.
You know what? Yeah, because I feel like he killed Maddie first. He liked a lot of Maddie's pictures. I feel like he just wanted to kill Maddie and then just dip.
And Maddie's room, that was Maddie's room.
Right.
So the fact that he was scoping out the house, the fact that he went to Maddie's room first.
Right.
He found, and I mean, maybe he was not expecting Maddie and Kaylee to even be together. Right. Now, criminologist Brianna Fox believes that Xana and Ethan were just collateral damage.
Yeah.
And that according to the affidavit, Xana had received a DoorDash order shortly after 4 a.m. And returned to her second floor bedroom. That's where they feel like she likely came face to face with the killer.
Yeah.
And that's how it ended up being, well, I came there to murder maybe, hypothetically, one person, which was Maddie.
Right.
Maddie just so happened to be laying in the bed
with Kaylee.
With Kaylee. Kaylee ends up getting murdered. So now I ended up murdering 2 people instead of the one person I came here for.
Yep.
Then on his way out, because he probably already was thinking, well, it's going to take this amount of time. It ends up taking longer.
Right.
He ends up leaving. A DoorDash order comes at 4:12 a.m. We don't know if that's a normal thing for Xana or anybody in the house to do.
Right.
A DoorDash order gets there at 4:12 a.m. He runs into Xana, and then that's when he ends up murdering Xana and Ethan, her boyfriend, because now her boyfriend's also spending the night there.
Right.
Well, her boyfriend lived there, I believe. So her boyfriend is there, and now he ends up murdering 4 people, which then goes to Brianna's point of by the time that Dylan opened up the door and saw him, even if he saw her, he's probably too exhausted.
Yeah.
He's probably overstepped his plan, and he's like, well, let me just get out of here.
Yeah.
And that's why he left.
Before she calls the cops and I'm tired, and then they catch me.
Yeah, exactly. So one of the survivors, Dylan, also said that she heard crying coming from Xana's room. Now remember, with that timeline that I gave earlier,
Right.
the security camera that was located 50 feet away from Xana's room picked up noises, some voices. Dylan also said that she heard noises coming from Xana's room. She heard a male voice saying something along the lines of, "It's okay, I'm going to help you." Around 4:17 a.m., the security camera picked up some of those voices and those noises, followed by a loud thud and barking by Kaylee's dog. Dylan Mortensen, who's the person that survived in the house that also witnessed all this stuff, later opened her bedroom door and saw a man dressed in all black, wearing a black mask with bushy eyebrows and walking toward the back of the house. That's how we got the description
of how he looked.
He exited through the sliding door without harming her. Now, despite all of this evidence, the defense, who's defending Bryan, believe that they could poke holes, because remember, they don't have to prove his innocence. They only have to create doubt.
That's true.
So Steve and Christy Goncalves maintain open minds that maybe it wasn't even him.
Oh.
So they're just keeping an open mind.
Yeah, well, just so that they also don't get disappointed, right? Because if you're gung-ho on this person did it, this person killed my child, and then just, I don't know, the jurors find there's not enough credible evidence and enough credibility to be like, yeah, it was him, and they don't like persecute him, and he doesn't get jail time and stuff, then that goes everything you kind of like worked for. You get
exactly.
What I mean?
And Howard Bloom and Brianna Fox pointed out that the defense may attempt to poke holes in the prosecutor's case by using the same evidence that we're using against him to prosecute him. They can use that same evidence to poke holes in the case. For example, they can say, even though Kohberger's phone pings place him in the area, it doesn't necessarily place him. It's circumstantial because it doesn't necessarily place him inside of their house. So the same way you can say, hey, cell phone pings say you were in the area. It doesn't mean did it ping me at their house? Because it doesn't. It's location. True. It just says that I was in the location, but it doesn't say that I was in their house.
That's true.
Also, there's notable absence of any of Kohberger's DNA or any of their DNA on his person. And which is something that's unusual given how gruesome the crime is and how personal stabbing somebody to death is. The fact that he did that to 4 individuals in this gruesome manner with that particular knife. And blood was splattering everywhere to the point where blood was even oozing on the outside of the exterior walls. It's pretty unusual to not even have any of his DNA end up on them or then their DNA end up on him.
But then again, you got to remember he was like a criminal student and not just like a regular criminal student. This man is like PhD, like
He's
I'm
going for his
serious,
PhD.
like this is everything PhD type of timing about crime. So of course he would know how to clean up a crime scene.
And that's exactly what Christy and Steve Goncalves, I keep butchering their name. I'm just going to say Christy and Steve. That's exactly what Christy and Steve believe Kohberger may have done.
Yeah.
They believe that he showed up, he assembled what's called a kill kit, a set of tools specifically designed to carry out the murders. I agree with that because if he came there with a military style knife, that's to ensure that the person dies with that.
Right.
Now, on top of that, he studies criminology, PhD level studying, might I add.
Right.
And also his phone was in the area 12 times and one time the morning after the murder, meaning he's cased out the house. Probably he's seen when they're going and coming. It's already estimated. It's already been predicted that he's been in the house one time before. So why would he not go through the extensive steps to clean up or make sure he has the proper tools to make sure he can get away?
Yeah, because he knows how serious and how like easy it is to gather evidence against someone based on like the things they did before they killed. So he kind of knows, okay, well, this is what I need to do to prevent myself. But not just that. Yeah, of course, I do agree with the fact that he might have went into the house before. Because think about it. How else is he going to know where to go?
To go to Maddie's room.
Right. If not, it would have been like...
And Maddie's room is on the 3rd floor.
Right.
That's not even the first room. So like if you were doing a random murder, yeah, you wouldn't go all the way up to the top floor. Right. You would go... Exactly. And he went to the one person's room in which... out of any connection that he has, it was the one person that lived there that he was liking all their photos.
Exactly.
So the next thing, though, is that also the defense also filed claims that there's other unidentified male DNA that was found at the scene. 2 samples inside the house and 1 on a glove found outside. Now, because remember, there's a gag order on this case.
Yeah.
So there's no... We're not going to know until the case gets started who that DNA belongs to if they've even found the people who the DNA belongs to. But, you know, obviously the victims of the crime and the people who suspect that it's Bryan that did this crime are hoping that the DNA that they found on the glove also matches him in some way. Because then they'll be able to say, well, the description also said he had on gloves and that is found there. So, but as of right now, that's it's unidentified male DNA.
Yeah.
There's also been other alternative theories such as possible drug debts and, you know,
as if like they owed money to some drug dealer, like they just kept buying drugs and then never paid them back, and he just
like
came
one
to
of those theories.
But then that's stupid as fuck, because why would you send a criminal PhD student to collect your
No. So the theory is also that it's not even Bryan, that it's somebody that came to collect drug debts. Because, a lot of people can't even fathom the fact that 4 college students that are doing what they're supposed to do have never on paper been bothering anybody, would just get brutally murdered in their home like that on a random Sunday morning.
That's very true.
But
that doesn't make sense.
The Christy and Steve believe that that's just some Hollywood BS, and it's not even taken seriously by a lot of people. But, people, when they can't explain things, will come up with solutions that they feel like can fill in the gaps.
Yeah.
Prosecutors are also seeking to use a college paper that Bryan Kohberger wrote on crime scenes. They're planning to use that as evidence in this case. On May 13, 2023, exactly 6 months to the day after the murders, the University of Idaho had graduations. The victims' families accepted their diplomas on their behalf. Xana Kernodle had plans to start a marketing company with her sister. Kaylee had accepted a job offer in Austin, Texas to work for an IT firm. And in February, Olivia Goncalves, who's the sister of Kaylee, gave birth to a baby girl, naming her Maddie K in honor of their names. Now, here's what's very coincidental and crazy.
What?
Her room number that she gave birth in was 1113.
Okay.
Which is the date that
they
were murdered. The time of birth was 4:21 a.m. eerily mirroring the time of the murders.
That's insane.
Yeah. Bryan Kohberger's trial is currently scheduled to begin in June 2025. So that's just in a couple weeks.
Yeah.
That's like 6 weeks, 5-6 weeks.
Yeah, that's right around the corner.
Yeah. And so here's my theory, right? Here's my theory. If it is Bryan, which I do firmly believe that it is him, I believe that, yes, even though there's evidence to say that he went on Reddit and was asking criminals that question, there's also evidence to say that, you know, I've done a research paper before in college, and I did a research paper on serial killers.
Right.
Now, I was trying to look for it so that I could reference some of the things that I said to try to tie into this case, but I couldn't find it.
Right.
I know it's in this house. I just can't find it. Right. But like, I had to go do research in different books. I had to read different articles. I had to watch a bunch of videos on YouTube just to make this very short research paper. I have a brother that's earned a PhD. You have to do I think it's like a thesis. It's a very long article book. It's a book basically.
Yeah.
That shows that you're proving a very specific point. Now, I don't know I think it's called like a dissertation. I don't know what his dissertation's on, but obviously it has something to do with criminology.
Right.
And criminology, if we were to look up the definition of what criminology is, it's the scientific study of crime, criminal behavior, and the criminal justice system, including the prevention and treatment of crime. If he's writing a thesis or a dissertation for a PhD degree on crime to become a criminologist, it would make sense that he would be, that you can't hold, like, in court, that would not necessarily hold up to just prove that he's the killer because he went on Reddit and was asking about that.
Right.
Because you can also say, hey, I was doing it for research purposes. I do believe, though, because my brother's PhD was on, it was in music. And I believe that his dissertation was on how learning an instrument, the impact that it has on the brain and on education, and how it makes you better at learning. Basically, on like a dumbed down version. Yeah. Obviously, his version was a lot more smart than the explanation that I'm giving.
Right.
But that's what it entails to write a thesis like that.
Right.
My thinking is that he was an individual that was obsessed with this individual, Maddie. And that and I have two theories, and my second theory is out of this world, fucking batshit crazy, but it is a potential theory.
Okay.
First theory is he's studying for his PhD. He wants to know what it's like to kill somebody. He wants to know what it's like to kill somebody, but also know what he wants to know, if everything he's learning at school that has to do with crime, that has to do with crime scenes, how true is it? Because he's going to get all the information about how their bodies were positioned, about how the crime scene looked from the news. Right. But most criminologists are never there when the crime actually occurs. I bet you money there's a statistic that 99.9% of criminologists have never actually been in the room when a brutal crime happened or witnessed it with their own two eyes. Right. I think he wanted to take his learnings to the next level. I think he did not only want to learn about criminology and get his data from actually asking criminals questions such as how did you pick and what did you use and things like that. Right. But he also wanted to follow through on what they said and so that he can that out physically see with his eyes, is what I'm learning in school and the information that we're gathering online accurate. That would make him better at his job, but also give him the knowledge to know from a criminal's perspective what they're thinking, what they're feeling, why they do certain things. And I think that maybe he had an unhealthy obsession with Maddie and he decided to use her as a victim. Maybe. He used all of the same tactics that one of the most well-known serial killers of all time that managed to vanish off the face of the earth for 40 years was using. The only thing that they used to tie it to him was his cell phone data and all these records. But that's still not even enough. So he knew that he'd probably get exonerated off of that data. But he probably did everything in his power to make sure no DNA was there. And the fact that he was able to do these brutal murders and leave no traces of DNA except for one little speck of DNA on the knife sheath just goes to show how well he was able to mask his crime.
Yep.
So that's probably his only fuck up.
Yeah.
In his mind, he's probably thinking, damn it, that little piece of evidence, that tiny ass little piece.
Right.
But outside of that, there was nothing
There was
else.
nothing else.
Now, unless they're able to find it on this glove and
whatever else they found.
whatever else they found.
Right.
Now, there's a gag order on the case. Obviously, we're going to learn more about it in June, and we'll be providing update episodes as that's going on.
Right.
But that's my theory. He wanted to know what it was like, and that's why he used that very specific knife. Knife. It creates so much damage, so much blood, so much everything that it was guaranteed this person would die. I think Brianna Fox and the other investigators were right that he went in there to kill one person, but ended up killing the second person, running into another person, and then ended up running into another person. And by the time he technically maybe ran into Dylan,
right?
Because the fact that Dylan was able to see him and give that description, he probably knew that she was there too. But he's like, yo, I'm tired. Yeah. I've been here way longer. I didn't set out to kill multiple people.
Right.
That's probably how, think about this. That's probably how DNA even ended up on that knife sheath. I'm not a criminologist. I've never committed a murder, nor do I ever plan to.
Right.
But somebody that does study criminology, that's able to clean up that well, him getting caught off guard with Kaylee also being there with Maddie is probably the only thing that made him catch a hiccup in the moment.
Right.
Because he even left behind the knife sheath. If he had taken that with him, we wouldn't have that DNA.
No one would know.
But he probably ended up not taking that with him because he got caught off guard.
Yeah.
He did that murder, and
also,
as he's trying to leave
Kaylee
quickly,
was fighting,
that's how he ran into.
Well, we know that
Xana.
Kaylee was fighting for her life, right?
Yes.
So obviously she must have been kicking and screaming and fighting, right? There's a slight chance that the knife sheath ended up falling based on them, like on her physically fighting for her life.
And he says, I gotta leave. And as he's trying to leave quickly, he forgets the knife sheath.
Right.
But then also he runs into Xana, who he's not expecting to be awake, but also he's like, damn, I wasn't expecting
Now
this.
I have to, right.
That's probably where they hear the voices. He's probably talking to her, probably trying to lie. Who knows?
That's true.
And that's where the loud thud comes in and all that other stuff. But that's my first theory. My second theory is that this is some Scream bullshit. You ever seen the movie Scream? How there's like a bunch of, you've seen the movie Scream.
Yeah.
How there's a bunch of different twists and turns and people that you don't think are involved are involved the whole time in a weird way. I don't think the roommates were involved, but I wouldn't be surprised if they ended up being involved in some way, shape, or form, because taking 8 hours to call the cops, seeing your friend who was clearly brutally murdered laying on the floor but thinking that she's just passed out doesn't make sense to me.
And
if
then
the crime
you
scene
not
was
doing
that brutal.
anything about it. That's the thing. Like,
the crime scene was that brutal. You saw that she was unconscious and you're on the phone. It's not, oh, hey, my friend was murdered. It's she's unconscious.
Right.
I find that weird. It took 8 hours to call the cops and there's a 13th visit apparently.
Right.
Could that have been a cleanup?
Of some sort.
That they were just making sure that they cleaned up?
Who knows at what time he showed up at that house.
Exactly. And who knows, maybe Bryan is just so sick that he left that little piece of DNA on the knife sheath on purpose.
Yeah.
And said, that's going to be your only thing and it's still not going to matter.
Because he probably knows. Like, it's not enough.
Studying criminology, you know what's going to work in court and what's not.
Exactly.
You know what evidence to leave behind and what evidence not to.
Exactly.
You know what can possibly stick in court and what can't. And the first words out of his mouth when he gets arrested is to his lawyer is that he's looking forward to getting exonerated. That does not sound like somebody
that sounds like planned behavior.
That does not sound like somebody that's saying, hey, I'm innocent of this crime. No. What the fuck? Like, that sounds like I'm looking forward to proving that I can get away with this.
Right.
Going on to become a criminologist.
Right.
And, maybe he doesn't want to work in criminology. Maybe he was just, I don't know. That's so weird.
That's what I mean. That doesn't make any sense. Like, I feel like you said, I feel like your first theory is completely right. I feel like he was very obsessed with criminology and all that stuff. And he really did want to feel out for himself what that was like. I felt like that's what he was aiming to do. And he probably met like Maddie at one of those bars or one of those places that, you know, people just hang out in and stuff. Like he probably just met her, blah, 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 blah. He was like, you know what? That is the perfect victim. And then he started following her and then like stalking her, seeing what her schedule was like. And obviously I feel like there was times, the time that he ended up going to the house was the times that he knew Maddie was and wasn't around. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the other roommates aren't around. So he might think, oh, it's just Maddie, or it's just Maddie and one or two other people. You get what I mean?
And there's evidence to show that potentially, I don't know how true it is. I read one quick article on it, but it was suggested, or it's thought that two of the roommates were actually planning to head back out.
Oh shit! Who are those?
That there's
two?
a chance that they were planning to head back out.
What the heck?
So if that is the case and he knew their schedule, he probably actually wasn't thinking that they would be all home.
Exactly.
And that's why that ended up happening that way.
Exactly. Which is insane. That's some
so
sick
we'll be keeping updates. We'll be providing updates on the case like in June.
Yeah.
When the court starts. Case is going on.
Right.
We'll be providing some updates with new information, because I bet a ton of new information is going to come out.
Especially since
I'm really curious to see whose DNA that is on the glove and the other unidentified male DNAs that's in the house. But of course, you're talking about a college town, a house that's off campus.
Right. Not just that, but
I would assume that other males would be going there, not just Xana's boyfriend that lives there.
But Xana's boyfriend lives there, so that's probably the other DNA. You get what I mean? So like,
no, I think that they've already ruled out that it might be his DNA.
Oh, really? Okay.
Unidentified male DNA,
Right,
remember?
right.
But I'm assuming that there's other males that have stopped by the house, whether it's Ethan's friends or...
You remember Kaylee had a boyfriend.
Kaylee also had a boyfriend. Like, it could be any of that. So, yeah. With that being said, there's, I'm looking forward to updating on the case. And this has been another episode of Voltage and Villains. If you've enjoyed this episode and you're watching it on YouTube, like the video, share it with friends, subscribe to the channel for more. We post often. Turn on automatic downloads on Spotify. You can also find these podcasts on Apple Music. And until next time, be safe, do good, take care.
Bye.